Mike, the importance of free will cuts across all areas. For example, the problem of evil is one that atheists use to attack theists. Theists respond with the so-called free will defense. And then some atheists come back and use a complex understanding of free will to attack the free will defense. Explain how this works and why that's important to understand free will.
Okay, so I'll start with the problem of evil. So here the problem is what's called the logical problem of evil, where the atheists will say, look, God's nature is not compatible with his allowing instances of gratuitous evil. So you have people like John Mackey who'll say, but that goes for all evil. God's nature is not compatible with him allowing any instance of evil whatsoever, right? So here, Mackey's claim in the logical problem of evil. Every possible world is such that if God is there, there's no evil there, right? So the response to the free will defense is just to say, well, all I need to show is that there's one possible world in which God exists and evil exists. Doesn't have to be the actual world, right? So if there's a world like that, then I've shown that the logical problem is not a problem. It's the logical problem of evil is so strong, claiming that there's no world at all in which God exists.
You just need one.
All you need is
one possibility.
Exactly, right? So you just need one. So that's how the response goes. The free will defense effectively says, maybe evil is necessary because God allows people to act freely, and he can't interfere with their freedom. So here, he creates these beings. He may even foresee that they're going to go wrong, but he says, of all the worlds I could create, this is the best I can do. I can't manipulate you because you lose your freedom.
And that only has to happen in one world.
One world out there.
All right, so now how do the atheists come back and attack the free will defense?
Right. They say, well, you've got a mistaken notion of freedom. They say, why doesn't God just nudge you or cause you to behave in the right way? Right? And so there's this compatibilist view of freedom. It says, you can both be caused to behave rightly and also do it freely. Right? So the freedom part's really important because that's where all the moral value comes from. What's so great about free action? Well, it creates value. So worlds in which you have free agents freely choosing to do the right thing, it's a really good world, right? So they say, well, can't you have your cake and eat it too? Have God causing them to behave the right way. You get all the moral value because his causing it is compatible with them being free at the same time.
So basically it uses the concept of compatibilism in free will, which basically, whether a God world or no God world, says that your actions are totally determined, whether it's determined by the laws of physics or determined by the commands of God, whatever it is, you're determined, but compatibilists say you can still be free if it meets some other conditions. Nobody has a gun to my head, or I'm relatively sane, I'm not in a straitjacket or whatever. Yeah, and so that's the compatibilist view of freedom. So they use that to attack the free will defense.
They do. They say, why doesn't he do that?
God can do that. God can make a free will world that has a compatibilist view.
And there's something appealing about that view. The appeal is that they say, well, look, suppose determinism isn't true, right? Compatibilism is false. Well, then you've got individuals choosing to do things uncaused. You can't have uncaused behavior. That's just random. That's not free either. Right? That's the alternative. So they say the alternative is unacceptable. The only kind of freedom there really is compatibilist freedom. That's kind of the move they want to make. And there's some intuitive appeal to that, I find anyway.
Yeah. So what they're saying is that if you don't like compatibilism and you try to escape from it, you're going to be worse off.
Basically.
Because it's just randomness and randomness.
This is part of the real problem of free will generally.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether determinism is true. Looks like you're not free. Determinism isn't true. Looks like you're not free.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So you think, well, it's sort of
all the alternatives are
bad.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. All right. So now, how do you attack the counterattack of the atheists using compatibilism?
Yeah, I
to
say
defend theism ultimately.
Right. And my claim is that look, it doesn't help the atheists to go with the compatibilist argument. So what I want to say is this: just concede compatibilism is true for the moment. Say, okay, suppose you guys are right about that. Then it would be the case that God in every world caused agents to behave rightly. That's in every world in which God exists. And let's just assume he exists in every world.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always causing agents that he creates to act in the right way. That would even violate compatibilist strictures, right? Compatibilists at least have to hold that when you do something right and it's caused, it's at least metaphysically possible that you go wrong. I know that sounds a little strange, but there's got to be some possible world, even if you're not able to actualize it, in which, here, I'm caused to do the right thing, right? I keep my promise in this particular situation. God causes me to do that. And I want to urge, it's got to be at least possible that in some world out there, God lets me not keep my promise.
But still keep the compatibilist?
Yes, it has to be the case, I think.
So how does that work?
Because if you don't, suppose you don't do that. Suppose in every possible world in which I exist and I'm in that situation, I keep my promise. That's a form of fatalism, right? So you're thinking, even compatibilists want to say, I think for the most part, in fatalistic worlds, I'm not free.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a stronger thing. If you want to defend the view in fatalistic worlds, I'm free too, that's really out there.
That's extreme compatibilism.
So,
most don't want to do that.
Exactly. So the compatibilist has to say, okay, you are determined to do it, but you're not fated to do it. But how do you get that?
And what's the subtle difference?
The difference is that there's a world out there in which I don't. Okay? So it might be a world that I can't actualize, I can't bring it about, but it's good.
When you're saying I, you mean God?
Oh, I'm sorry, me. No, the agent of the action. So here, I kept my promise, God caused me to do it, but in order to ensure that I'm not in a fatalistic world where each one of my actions is necessitated, right? Not simply by the laws of nature and by the facts that hold beforehand, but the very act itself is necessitated because there's no world in which I do anything else, right? In fatalistic worlds, that's what it's like.
Yeah, it's absolutely impossible.
Every little thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Every little thing is necessary. So you think, even compatibilists want to draw the line somewhere and say, no, you're not free there. We're not saying that's true. But as soon as they say that, I've got all I need for the free will defense. I've got a world out there in which God exists. I failed to keep my promise. I do something wrong, right? It's a minor evil. But God is there, and the logical problem of evil evaporates.
But in that world, since God is causing your actions, how is God allowing that to happen?
He lets me do it.
Yeah. He lets you do it.
Yeah.
He lets you do it in that one world.
He's got to. He's got to. That, if you want, that can even be a deterministic world too. I'm happy with that. So he determines me to behave
okay.
in that way there.
Oh, so God in one possible way, God has set that up in order to make the whole system non-fatalistic.
Exactly. So if the problem is what happens, the response to the atheist is to look at the big picture. So you look at all of logical space. Somewhere in one of those worlds, I've got to fail to keep my promise. Otherwise, you've got nothing but fatalistic worlds. And I'm assuming, although this is not true for every compatibilist, you don't want to say that even in a fatalistic world, I'm free. I think they don't want to say that.
Right.
Some will say it, by the way, but most won't.
And the difference between a fatalistic world and a deterministic world, to tease those apart.
Sure, it's just it's kind of one level up in determinism. Okay, so it's not just that if I have these laws and these circumstances, this is think of it conditional. If the laws hold and the history holds, this event holds. Necessarily, the conditional.
Right.
For fatalism, you move the necessity in. So the very action itself is now necessary. You can forget about the other things. You don't even need them.
So it's a higher order necessity, if you will.
Right. It's like, boy, I really can't do anything other than what I'm doing.
Okay. All right. So you think this works? You think you've undermined the attack of the free will defense, and therefore free the free will defense through good free will theory support the existence of God.
That's the move. Yep.